Welcome everyone, this is Mixtapes over at Healslinger.com, bringing you our very first video commentary. Today's commentary is LAS builds for group leveling. Alright, so let's get started. As you can see, I've made a level 1 Cassian. She only has her Spell Surge, which is her innate ability, and then Quick Draw, okay? So let's open up her action set builder. As you can see, assault abilities, these are going to be all her DPS damaging abilities. Support, this is going to be for healing. Utility, just like the name applies, utility. So any of our stuns, our freezes, our purifies, our focus regens, all that stuff is going to be found here, okay? All right, so one of the first things I want to talk to you guys about is when healing is actually available. You can see the first healing spell that we get is not available until level 6, okay? Runic Healing and Runes of Protection are at level 6. So that begs the question, what do we do in the meantime? And as you can see here in the Assault tree, we can get all kinds of stuff. Charge Shots available at 2, Ignite at 4, Wild Barrage at 6. Every time you guys level up between 1 and 6, it's going to be really hard for you guys not to want to buy spells, but I'm going to tell you right now, don't buy any spells, especially for the methods that we're describing how to do this. Money is super tight early on, so from 1 to 6, don't buy any abilities. Just don't tell the other DPS. That's all I'm going to say. Just Spell Surge, Quick Draw, hit Quick Draw. That's all I want you to do. The mobs don't hurt that much. You regen super quick. In a group of 5, things are just going to fall over. It's not super important that you're quote-unquote contributing to the rest of the group. You're going to pay for your worth later on, especially when you're going to need to heal. Okay? So with that being said, let's just jump straight over to support. Okay? Now, first of all, I'm just going to run through all the abilities that we have at our disposal from starting at level 6 all the way to level 27 when we pick up Sustain. Okay? So first off, you can see Runic Healing. Again, we get it at level 6. At base value, it's a 2-second channel, 4 focus per tick, no cooldown, and it'll restore 6 health to an ally every 0.5 seconds while stationary, or while we're moving. If we're stationary, it's going to allow us to recoup 10 health per tick, which is very important. So Runic Healing, if you can, stand still. This shouldn't be a problem for you guys unless you have to move out of the way for telegraphs, or if your tank's not doing a very good job keeping aggro on things. If your tank's doing those things, it's probably not going to work out well for you guys, and you guys probably need to rethink your strategy, calling things out, or maybe going to a different zone to tackle smaller mobs, because you should never be casting this while moving around. It's not very efficient, especially when we're trying to pump out as many heals as possible, especially early on. Alright, our next ability we have here is Runes of Protection. This grants an absorb for yourself and 4 allies for 10 seconds. Be very careful when you cast this. If you guys head over to Healslinger.com, I have a great article up on absorbs and how they work as opposed to healing. Absorbs generate threat 1-to-1. So what does that mean? So you can see it does 54 absorb here at level 1. If I cast that on me and all the other party members, I'm going to do 260 aggro right off the bat. So if your tank doesn't have aggro on things, or if he's moving in and you cast this, you're going to get snap aggro, and early on that's going to be very difficult for the tank to overcome because they don't have their 4 complementary abilities. So just be very careful when you guys are running Runes of Protection. Okay, at level 9, it starts to get a little better for us. We get our first big spell. It's Vitality Burst. It has 3 charges, as you can see there. Charge 1 gives 16 health with a 4-second cooldown. Charge 2 is 25 with a 6-second cooldown. And Charge 3 is 64 health at 8-second cooldowns. Your best bang for your buck is C3. It's great. Even though it's a longer cooldown, you shouldn't have problems with this because it's going to be our most efficient spell until we get Healing Torrent at level 18, which I'll explain when we get to it. Our next ability is Astral Infusion. We get this at level 11. It's a single target heal, one of our only 2 targeting ability heals, the other one being Runic Healing. This increases or restores 53 health at base at level 1 for us, and 10 health every 2 seconds for 4 seconds. So it gives a nice 2-tick hot on the back end of a big heal. The problem is this has a gigantic cooldown, 30 seconds, and it's kind of terrible. Okay, next, required level 13 for Healing Salve. This applies Healing Salve to you and everybody in your party. What happens is it's a reactive hot, so every time that somebody in our party takes damage, it will heal for the amount it says it's going to heal, okay? This can only happen once every 2 seconds. We'll get into this ability a little bit later. This is probably my favorite spell, even though it's not very sexy. I'll explain why when we start talking about tiering up and getting to our major tier upgrades at tier 4. All right, dual fire. We get this at 15, so right when we're getting ready to be able to do adventures, dual fire is available for us. It's a 1.6 second cast time, and it has a 5-second cooldown, so end to end, we're looking at 6.6 seconds for throughput here. This hits everybody in our party and up to 5 foes, and the healing and the damage are the exact same. All right, our next ability here, Healing Torrent, we get that at level 18. This is actually unlocked through amps. You're going to need to take at least 2 tier 2 amps to have this unlocked. Get this as soon as possible because this is going to be your bread and butter. This is your best spell overall, and you will be using the heck out of this thing. So as soon as you're going to be able to get it, go ahead and equip it and start using it. The cool thing about this spell is it heals you and 4 allies. The downside with this spell is that it only has a 3-second cooldown, but it carries a 5-second debuff timer that increases the cost by 9 for each cast used, stacking up to 2 times. So as you can see here, at base level, it costs 35 focus, but if we stack it up 1 time, it now will be 44, and if we stack it up twice, it will be 53. So it gets super expensive, and your efficiency goes down. Your throughput does go up significantly, but it's not worth the penalty. Okay, our next ability here is Void Spring. Now we get this at 21. This is a nice G AoE heal. That's ground area of effect. It's a hot, so you put this down on the ground, it'll last 12 seconds, and it'll heal anybody that touches it every second for the amount it's given. Next ability that we have here is Regenerative Pulse. We get this at level 24. It will do a static amount of healing. As you can see here, it says 52 divided up amongst 3 allies, not counting yourself. So this heal is really weird and kind of stupid, if you ask me. So it doesn't do any self-healing, and it splits up 52 health among 3 people. Okay, finally our last heal ability that we get is at level 27. This one's called Sustained. As you can see, it also has a charge similar to Vitality Burst. It only has 2 instead of 3, but as you can see, 15 health for a 3-second cooldown or 39 health for a 6-second cooldown. Again, C2 is going to be way more bang for the buck, and use that especially if people have damage. Again, if there's not much damage out, you have a potential for overhealing. Just watch that and moderate that. Like I said, it acts like Vitality Burst, but its range and how it's cast looks like Healing Salve. So it's kind of like a hybrid between Vitality Bursts and Healing Salve. Okay, so now that we've gone over all our spells, let's actually go into how we're actually going to make our builds. I always run 5 heals and 2 utility up until level 30. At level 30, we get 6 heals or 2 abilities, or 8 slots. All our slots are actually unlocked at level 30 in our action build, but I still do 6 and 2. So I usually only use 2 utility, and I use 5 or 6 depending on how many we have available in our action set. I'll explain a little bit more later about group and group comp. You might want to do 5 and 3. Gate, Void Slip, and Arcane Shock are all great to have. Gate, you blink forward, kind of like a mage in Warcraft, and anything that was in your range will be stunned for a short duration. Void Slip acts like a Hunter's Feign Death. You actually leave this realm and go to another realm for 4 seconds. Or if you want, you can click it early and come back. It drops all threat, and it can get you out of disabled and all kinds of other fun stuff. It's super useful. I really like this spell. And finally, Arcane Shock. It's another interrupt armor that you can hit people with. So when you're running in groups, if you're fighting high-level mobs, it might be nice for everybody in your party to run 2 interrupts. So this is our second one that we have here. Okay, now let's look back at support and let's look at some builds that we have going on here. 6 through 13, you guys are just going to take all these abilities, okay? You don't have to do any shuffling around. You don't have to, make a choice between what you want to use and what you don't want to use. Once you have 15, then you have to start making decisions. So at 15, we have Runic Healing, Runes of Protection, Vitality Burst, Astral Infusion, Healing Salve, and Dual Fire. This is an easy choice for me. I would knock out Astral Infusion, okay? This is a single targeted heal, has a long cooldown, and the upside's just not that great. It's really not worth it. If they, lowered the cooldown or, increase the oomph of the spell, it would be worth it maybe early on, but this spell's got to go. So 15, when you guys are starting to do Right in the Void, I would take Runic Healing, I would take Runes of Protection, I would take Vitality Burst, and I would take Healing Salve as well as Dual Fire. As far as your ability points go, at this point, it doesn't really matter how you cycle through everything. I would lean on the side of putting points into Vitality Burst, Dual Fire, and Runes of Protection. Dealer's choice, whatever you guys want to do. The thing is that Vitality Burst is our best spell until 18, so I really like to dump points into that. Runes of Protection can be really nice, especially if the tank doesn't have a lot of gear. Even though it's up for 10 seconds with an 18-second cooldown, you can still mitigate a lot of damage with Runes of Protection. So just kind of play by ear with your tank and things, how it goes, and determine what's the best plan to put points into. And like I said earlier, be very careful though, because of the snap aggro that's associated with Runes of Protection. Okay, so at level 18, we're gonna get healing. We're gonna get healing torrent. Throw this into your rotation. At that point, we're still going to have to make some decisions. So you have to decide what we want to get rid of now. For me, I get rid of Runes of Protection. By level 18, your tank should have a decent amount of mitigation. They should have some abilities that they can use to help you out, and it's just not very practical. The only person that should be getting hit is the tank, and with a 10-second use time and an 18-second downtime, I'd much rather just get the healing through with Healing Torrent, because you can cast it if need be every 3 seconds, but if you don't want to have the increased cost associated with that, you can cast it every 5 seconds. So you can get 3 Healing Torrents cast in the time that a Rune of Protection could be used. And especially if you don't use all your absorb in your Runes of Protection, you're just wasting its usefulness. Okay. At level 21, you get Void Spring. Void Spring is super good if you're doing dungeons or if you're doing adventures. However, I choose in group leveling to stick with Dual Fire, even though in some of my other articles over at Healslinger.com I've talked about how great Voice Spring is. In this application, in this instance of what we're trying to accomplish, I'm going to say just skip this for now and stick with Dual Fire. The nice thing with Dual Fire is that you are healing people and you're also doing damage, so you're also speeding up the process a little bit. We'll talk more about Dual Fire and its unique role in grinding here later, especially when we get to the tier bonuses and everything else. At 24, Regenerative Pulse, this ability, I just want to give it back to Carbine. This ability, again, is super terrible. I see no purpose for it. Maybe in a 3 or 5s team, or maybe in PvP would it be useful, but I don't use this spell at all in PvE. It has no self-healing, and I just can't find a use for it. So, again, at level 24, stick to the rotation you guys created at 18 and go from there. At level 27, we get Sustain. Sustain is good. Again, it acts like Vitality Bursts with a range of Healing Salve. However, At 27, we still have to make a decision on what we want to lose, and I like dual fire too much for that. You shouldn't if you're having throughput problems, this would be the time that you replace dual fire. If you're having problems keeping your party up, I would switch out sustain or switch out dual fire for sustain. If you guys aren't having any trouble grinding or whatever you're doing, then just stick with healing dual fire so you can help out your party. Once you get to level 30, you can pick up an extra ability. So at that point, you can pick up sustain. So if you don't need a second interrupt, or if things are dying super quick, you guys can do runic healing, runes of protection, vitality burst, healing salve, dual fire, sustain, and then two utility builds. If you're still having trouble with interrupts and stuff like that, I would still maintain gate, void slip, and I forget the name of the arcane shot. If you're running, a threat dump and two interrupts, I would still use those 3, and then those 5 abilities that I discussed there, and throw a sustain. Okay, now that I've talked about how I make my builds up to level 30, let's start talking about how we can tier things up. At level 25, we're able to put our first point into one of our abilities, and at tier 4, we gain an extra power associated with the ability, or a little extra wrinkle. I'll run through them real quick. For runic healing, our tier 4 major upgrade grants a defense. It decreases magic damage taken by 10% for 2.5 seconds, and while stationary, it increases that value by 16%. I can't, in PvE, I can't really find a good use for this. You have to be really surgeon-like with your precision to make sure that this lands, and 10% doesn't really seem like that big of a deal, especially if your tank knows what he's doing, and he should be able to mitigate whatever he needs to do. Again, that's single target cast, so you don't get very much benefit from that tier 4. Next, Runes of Protection. The tier 4 major upgrade is on spell's end, reduce cooldown by 1 second. So as you can see, the spell is up for 10 seconds. It has an 18-second cooldown. So after the spell is over, it'll have an 8-second cooldown, but now instead of 8 seconds, it will hit you with a 7-second cooldown. It's very underwhelming, and it provides no throughput or anything else whatsoever. Well, it does increase your throughput, I guess, technically, because it's 1 second lower, but it's not flashy, and it really doesn't do anything for you. This might be our worst tier upgrade. Okay, next, tier 4 for Vitality Burst. This is kind of useful. It increases our healing output by 4, 6, and 8 seconds for each charge, respectively. The problem is the charge is only good for 5 seconds. So when you get Bastion, you only really can cast 2 big spells, maybe 3 if you do like a healing torrent and then back-to-back runic healings. But the percentages here aren't that great. As far as this goes in grouping, if you're going to rely on a 4, 6, or 8 second increase in healing, you're better served putting it in healing torrent. Okay. Astral Infusion, the big thing here is its cooldowns reduced by 5 seconds, which might seem like a lot. It goes down to 25 seconds, but it still suffers from the same problems. It's inefficient, it has a long cooldown, and even reducing it from 30 to 25 doesn't really save the spell. Okay. All right, next, Healing Salve. As if you guys have been over to Healslinger.com, you guys have heard me rave about this ability, especially in dungeons early on. It's not as sexy as Vitality Burst with its extra healing done for 5 seconds, or the absorb that it puts on in things like Healing Torrent, but this thing is super useful. It has a huge cast range. It can cover your whole group, and instead of ticking once every 2 seconds on reactive damage, it ticks every second, so you have 20 opportunities to get heals back. This is super useful for the tank. This is also useful if there's like hot damage out, or dot, sorry, if there's dot damage out. If some of your people get hit by a telegraph and you can't get them right away, it's gonna heal them up a little bit to help them out. This is super useful. I really like this ability, and again, it just really flattens out some of the damage that you guys see, especially on the tank. The next one, this ability is really cool for grinding. This is going to be my second favorite for you guys. Again, at 25, I would put that first point into Healing Salve. At, I believe, 32 or 33, you're going to be able to put a second one in without gifting and nerfing your other abilities. At that point, I would go ahead and throw your second tier 4 ability into Dual Fire. You can see that its cooldown is to 1.5 seconds, and it's going to do healing and damage. Effectively, that this will now have more output than Vitality Burst. So you could lower Vitality Burst down. You can switch it out to a different ability. You could pick up Sustain at this time, since it has the same cone as Vitality Burst, and it has more throughput on a less cooldown. So effectively, if you do get this tier 4 upgrade at that time, you can knock out Vitality Burst and pick something else if you choose. I still run with both because it's super useful if you do need to cast it. You have something available for people, but it's going to be really hard to get your rotations down and hit these things right after cooldown with how fast Dual Fire comes off cooldown and your cast time of Healing Torrent. So just kind of be watching for that, and just don't be afraid to tinker with that stuff. Next, Healing Torrent. What its tier 4 ability does, it actually grants an absorb to players that are under the effects of either Void Spring or Healing Salve. The problem is in this build, or what we're trying to accomplish, we're not going to use Void Spring, so we have to make sure that Healing Salve is up on everybody at all times. And when you cast a Healing Torrent, it's going to put up a small bubble on all party members hit by it. And it's going to stay up for 5 seconds. So that's kind of nice if you're always running Healing Torrent on cooldown or on that 5-second cooldown. The absorb's almost up 100% of the time, and you're only going to lose it is if the whole thing's absorbed. The nice thing about absorbs, again, guys, is that absorbs happen before anything else. So say I have an absorb for 100, my health is 100, and my shield's 100. I get hit for 100. My absorb is taken out, and my shield and my health pool have not been affected. Now again, let's say if my health is 100, my shield is 100, and my absorb is 100, and I take 200 damage, my absorb will then be removed, my shield will then kick into place, and it will mitigate at a 50% rate. So if I get hit by 200 damage, my absorb would be taken, 50 points in my shield will be taken, and 50 points of my life will be taken. So just be mindful of that, how absorbs work and everything else. The next one, Void Spring. Its tier 4 ability is kind of lame. It just increases its size. The dumb thing about this is that we can see it on the ground, right? So there's no excuse for DPS that needs heals not to just walk over it and heal themselves. I say that, and have hours of frap so far of group members seeing it on the ground and just standing right up to it. I don't know if people get nervous that it's a blue telegraph or what. It's not going to hurt you guys. You can guys go ahead and stand in it. Just make sure you tell your party, you know, hey, Void Circle or Void Spring is good for you guys, and stand in it. But then again, back to the tier 4 bonus, the Void Spring doesn't really give any more throughput, and it just really increases the size and its visual, so meh, it's just kind of underwhelming. The next thing, Regenerative Pulse. Its cooldown is decreased by 5 seconds if only one person's been hit by it. So if you just hit the tank, it's going to drop the cooldown from 15 seconds to 10 seconds. Again, I guess that's cool, but this spell sucks. I don't use it, so you know they could tell me that they've increased the throughput or added healing to self or whatever they want to do to it. I'm never going to use this ability until the tooltip changes on it. Sorry Carbine, sorry Wildstar team, not going to happen. Finally, at 27 and sustain with our tier 4 here, the heal prioritizes allies with low health. This is awesome in raids, but in grouping, 5-man grouping to grind and to power level, it's worthless, right? Because it says it's going to heal you and 4 allies. Well, guess what? That's your whole party. So it's not going to say, oh, well, we have 10 people in the radius and we need to heal 5, what do we need to do? We don't need to make the decision for you. So don't waste the 5 points and put it into sustain. You're better off, picking up regenerative pulse and putting points into that before, thinking that tier 5 is going to be, or a tier 4 bonus with 5 ability points is going to be worth it for sustain. Okay guys, that concludes our video commentary on LAS builds for group leveling. Remember, for all our video content, don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube. You can also follow us on Twitter at Healslinger.com or at Twitch at twitch.tv/Healslinger for all our live streams, including our 24-hour marathon starting at 12:01 May 31st when the game goes live for Head Start. And please don't forget to check out all our content and articles from Irelin and myself over at Healslinger.com.